Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Labour and asks, will he commit to regulating the hours of work in the forestry sector immediately, given there have been 11 worker deaths in the sector in the past 13 months, and if not, why not?
Honourable Simon Bridges.
Speaker, no, I won't immediately, but I'm not ruling out regulation in the future. The reason for that is that I don't want to preempt the industry-led inquiry announced yesterday. I'm very pleased that the industry is taking ownership, as the enduring safety solutions needed require the industry front and centre. Nothing is off limits for the inquiry, and I'm sure hours of work will form part of their investigation. I've encouraged a speedy process so that I can consider the recommendations as soon as possible. In the meantime, I've also instructed WorkSafe New Zealand to review the approved Code of Practice for forestry in light of the low level of compliance they have seen in their visits to operators, and they will also continue their strong, proactive approach.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Denise Roche.
Does he think that all workers in the forestry industry are getting adequate rest breaks and that their fatigue levels and other factors that contribute to injuries and deaths are being well managed, and if so, why?
Honourable Simon Bridges.
Well, Mr. Speaker, fatigue, of course, and its effect on workplace health and safety are complex issues. And responding, I think, to this issue goes far beyond simple regulation of hours of work. The current duties of the Health and Safety and Employment Act already requires employers to manage this hazard. But as I say, in the inquiry, nothing is off limits, and I've no doubt they'll be looking at this and many other issues to do with forestry safety, and I am eagerly awaiting the recommendations.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question to Ururoa Flavell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, accepting, as I'm sure he does, the doctrine of ministerial responsibility for portfolios, can the Minister explain why it is that the forestry industry will lead the inquiry into its own malpractices rather than the government? And does he acknowledge that this sort of approach may not get to the heart of the issues around malpractice?
Honourable Simon Bridges.
Well, I think the best thing to do in that regard is to wait for the inquiry's recommendations. I'm sure we all hope, and I certainly believe they will get to the heart of it. But as I said in the answer to the primary question, I think it's very important that the forestry industry for itself shows ownership here. That's how we'll get an enduring solution. I think it's also worth appreciating that this government is leading the most significant reform of health and safety generally in at least 20 years. $30 million more each year for inspectors, a complete legislation rewrite, and much stronger enforcement approach than we've seen. And all of this has, I think, far-reaching consequences for the forestry industry.
Supplementary question, Denise Roche.
To the Minister, does he think that forest owners are playing their part to protect workers, given that half the logging operators visited last year by WorkSafe New Zealand were not complying with the industry code?
Speaker.
Honourable Simon Bridges.
Well, I think clearly and implicit in the question is the answer, and that is that some owners aren't. That's why a year and a month into the approved Code of Conduct, practice I should say, it is being reviewed with some urgency so that we go from the forest floor actually into the owners' boardrooms, and they take their part of the responsibility in this. I repeat again what I've said, that actually if you look at the legislation I'll be introducing very soon, there's been consultation drafts out there on. We are, I think, for the first time making people in the boardroom front these issues and have responsibilities for these issues as never before in this country.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Denise Roche.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, Does he think the current approved Code of Practice for Safety and Health in Forestry Operations, which was written by the industry itself with limited union or worker participation, is preventing injuries and deaths in the forestry sector? And if so, why?
Honourable Simon Bridges.
Well, I think the Code of Practice is a good resource for forest workers and indeed owners. But again, we know that since it's been in place, there have been a number of far too many deaths in this industry. As I say, that's why it's being reviewed, and I think you will see significant detail, particularly around owners' responsibilities and their obligations to their workers in there. The member also mentions worker participation. I think it's worthwhile again noting that the legislation that will be introduced to this House will have worker participation provisions and obligations for owners like never before in the history of this country.
Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
Why has it taken until only yesterday before he has started a review of the approved Code of Practice for Forestry, when as recently as 19 November last year, and since which time there have been 3 more forestry deaths, he told this House that, quote, the things that are the focus of the approved Code of Practice are the big issues and are what it focuses squarely on, unquote, and he saw no need for change.
Honourable Simon Bridges.
Well, that in fact is the true position, in that it is tree felling and breaking out, which are a primary area that the Code of Practice deals with, where we do see the majority of deaths in the forests. But as I say, what we also know, and we didn't know until the end of last year, as I say, almost exactly a year after the Code came into being, is that some 50% of owners are not complying with their obligations at law in this country. And so we didn't know it until the end of last year, actually, Mr. Little, and that is why there is a review going on and the Code will have much added to it.
Supplementary question, Denise Roche.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, does he think that WorkSafe New Zealand providing a secretariat and a submission to the industry-led inquiry into forestry safety is the most his government can do to stop injuries and deaths in the forestry sector?
Well, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Simon Bridges.
Well, of course it's not the most that we're doing. In the meantime, while the inquiry proceeds, and I hope with as much haste as it reasonably can, while also wanting to do an excellent job, we've got inspectors out there testing compliance with the Code of Practice every day. We've visited more than 2,000 players and more are being seen. There's prosecutions ongoing and I think more coming. There is the Chief Executive, the Chair of WorkSafe New Zealand and their workers meeting in boardrooms around this country of foresters to make it very clear what their obligations on. There are many other things indeed that are going on in this industry. So this is a government that is waiting for an inquiry to produce its findings, but in the meantime is taking urgent action.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Denise Roche.
To the Minister, why is he refusing to use his powers right now to make changes that will save lives and stop people being hurt in our forests?
Honourable Simon Bridges.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think that's a correct characterisation of what is happening. As I say, this government is taking urgent actions now, and we should also, I think, understand that this is the government that is implementing the biggest, most significant health and safety reforms, as I've said in earlier answers, in a generation, probably actually in several generations. So I think this government is doing a lot in this area, but it's also important that industry stands up and takes ownership, and it's good to see that happening with this inquiry.
Question number 11, Honourable Trevor Mallard.